The first crack in everything came at 1:40 in the morning, when Morena Vasari ran the column a third time, and the number at the bottom still read 1,140,000 short. She set the pencil down with the careful slowness of a person who knew the room she sat in. The wood-paneled office at the back of the warehouse on Vesper Lane was very quiet at that hour. A green-shaded lamp burned over the ledger. Behind her, the safe stood with its inner door open, and on the desk beside the ledger were 6 bundled deposit slips, 3 handwritten remittance notes, and the original receipts from Gallenstone Imports going back 90 days. She had matched every page herself. She had matched them twice already. The number had not moved. The man who would have to be told was her uncle. Morena Vasari was 25 years old and had been the bookkeeper of the family's clean side for 3 years. Before that, she had been the niece who slept in the upstairs room and did her sums at the kitchen table, while her aunt taught her how to fold a napkin around a candle so it would not snuff. Her mother, the favorite sister of the man who now ran the family, had died when Morena was 11. Her uncle had brought her home from the funeral in his own coat, and had said, in the only sentence he ever said about it, that the house was hers now, the way the rain was the sky's. He had paid for a good school and a better certificate, and had not asked her to do one wrong thing for him in 14 years. He had asked, instead, that she keep the clean books clean. She had done it. The restaurants paid their taxes. The bakery paid its taxes. The shipping concern paid its taxes. The 2 laundromats paid their taxes. The warehouse on Vesper Lane paid its taxes. Every dollar that walked under her hand had a paper behind it and a name on the paper, and the names were real. That was why the missing 1,140,000 was a knife. She turned the page back to the 3rd week of the prior month. The Galenstone account had come in with a remittance of 286,000. Ordinary, fine. The receiving slip in the warehouse log said 286,000. The deposit at Mercantile Trust said 286,000. The internal cashroom ticket, the one that should have matched, said 146. A clean 140,000 had walked between the cash room and the deposit window, and the courier who signed for both was Davide. Davide Roselli had been her uncle's right hand for 19 years. Morena pressed her thumb against the line until the pencil mark smudged. The bookkeeper part of her mind was already running the rest of the month. By the time she had been through Tuesday, she had found it 3 more times, always Davide's nights, always the cash room slip a round number short of the deposit ticket, always covered up the next morning by an adjusted memo over Davide's initials. The memos were good. They were good enough that a tax auditor would never have found them. They were not good enough for the woman who had typed every receipt by hand for 3 years. She closed the ledger. She put the deposit slips back in the envelope. She wrote the figure out one more time, in pen this time, on a fresh sheet, with no other word on the page, and folded it once. Then she put on the long gray coat that had been her mother's and walked through the dark warehouse and out under the awning and across 2 blocks to the river house. The river house was where her uncle slept when he was in the city. The light in the 2nd floor window was still on. She knew without ringing the bell that he would be at the chess set by the window, where he sat most nights when he could not sleep. Old Tommaso opened the door for her. Tommaso had been the butler since before she was born. He looked at the folded sheet in her hand and did not ask. He took her coat with the gentleness he had always shown her and said, "He is upstairs, child." "Tell him I am downstairs," Morena said. "I do not want to walk in if there is a guest." "There is no guest." "Tell him anyway." Tommaso went up. She heard the slow weight of his step and a longer silence, and then her uncle came down himself. Costanzo Vasari was 62 years old. He was not tall. He had the wide, settled chest of a man who had carried weight in his life, and the quiet of a man who had stopped needing to raise his voice some 20 years ago. He wore a charcoal cardigan over a white shirt with no tie, and his reading glasses pushed up on the white of his hair. He came down to her like a man comes down to a daughter in the dark, with the small worry in his face that he would not have shown to any other living person. "What is it, Morena?" he said. She held the folded sheet out to him. He opened it. He looked at the figure. He looked at her face. He folded the sheet again and slid it into the pocket of his cardigan. Sit down, he said. He took her into the small library off the hall and shut the door. He poured her a glass of water from the pitcher and set it in front of her. Then he sat across from her, and he put his hands flat on his knees, and he said, "Tell me how you found it." She told him. She used the dry voice of the bookkeeper, because that was the only voice in which the thing could be told. She told him about the Galen Stone receipts, and the cash room slips, and the 4 nights, and the memos with Davide's initials. She did not say Davide's name until the end. When she said it, she watched her uncle's eyes the way a child watches a doctor's face for the truth. Costanzo Vasari closed his eyes.
He sat like that for a long count. When he opened them, he was not looking at her.
He was looking at the wall behind her, at the photograph that had hung there for as long as she had been in the house her mother at 20, in a white blouse, laughing at something out of the frame. "How long have you known?" he said, very low. "Tonight. I balanced for the month tonight. You came straight here." "Yes." "You did not go to anyone else?" "No." He drew a slow breath through his nose and let it out. He said, "You understand what this means?" "Yes, uncle." "Tell me what you understand it means." She had been turning that question over for the whole walk. She knew the easy answer. She knew the answer her uncle wanted her to have. She gave him the true one. "It means," she said, "that the man who has stood at your shoulder for 19 years has been taking from you. It means that he has been doing it carefully, on the clean side, where no one looks. It means that he chose the clean side on purpose, because he knew that if he took from the other side, you would feel it in a week, and on this side, you might not feel it for a year. It means that if I had not balanced down to the cash room ticket, no one would have caught it. It means that if I had caught it and not come to you tonight, the next month would be worse, and the month after that would be worse, until something cracked open that you could not put back." She set her hand flat on the table beside the glass of water. Her hand was steady. She had not known until that moment that it would be steady. "It means," she said, "that I am sitting in your library at 2 in the morning because I would rather be the one who told you tonight than the one who let it keep happening." Her uncle looked at her for a long time. The clock in the hall struck the 1/4 hour. Somewhere upstairs, Tommaso had begun, very quietly, to make coffee. "Morena," her uncle said, "do you know what some men in my position would do with what you just brought me?" "Yes," she said. "Do you know what some men in my position would have done to the person who brought it to them?" "Yes." "And you came anyway. You are not those men." He looked down at his hands. They were old hands. The skin on the back of them had thinned to a paper she had not noticed until that night. "I am sometimes those men," he said. "Not always. Sometimes." Tonight you are not," she said. "Tonight you are my uncle." He was quiet for a long time after that. "Stay here," he said at last. "Stay in this house tonight. Tomorrow you do not go to the warehouse. Tomorrow you do not go to the office. You stay here, and you read a book, and you eat what Tommaso brings you, and you do not pick up the telephone. Will you do that?" "I will do that. You will let me handle the next part." "Yes." "Morena." He looked up at her. "Look at me." "Boo." "Morena." She looked at him. "You did the right thing," he said. "You did it the right way. You came to me with paper. You came to me alone. You came to me before you slept. You did not write to anyone. You did not tell Tommaso. You did not telephone the lawyer. You walked here." His voice did not change, but something behind it did, the way a deep current shows itself only in the small shift of the surface. "Your mother would have done the same. She did do the same, twice in her life that I know of. She came to me at this same hour, in this same room, and she put a paper in front of me, and she made me hear it. I had forgotten how that felt." He paused. "I had not forgotten. I had only put it away." Would. Marina did not trust her voice. She nodded. He stood up. He crossed the room and laid his hand for one moment on the crown of her head, the way he had laid it the day he had brought her home in his coat, 14 years before. Then He went to the door. "Sleep here tonight," he said again. "There is a room with your name on it. There has been since you were 11. She slept in the small blue room at the top of the stair, and she did not dream. She woke to a quiet house and a tray of coffee outside her door, and the smell of bread. She did as she had been told. She did not go to the warehouse. She did not telephone. She read a book of poems that had been her aunt's, and she ate the bread, and she watched the river from the window. The day moved slowly past her, like a wide river of its own. Twice she heard the front door. Once she heard a low voice she did not know in the front hall, speaking to her uncle, and then her uncle's voice answering, and then silence, and then the door again. The second time she heard old Tommaso say only, "Yes, sir," in the particular way he said it when he had been given an instruction he did not like, but would carry out exactly. She did not ask. She had said she would not, and she did not. Late in the afternoon, her uncle came up to her himself. He sat down in the chair by the window. He did not look like a man who had slept. He looked, more than anything, like a man who had finished writing a long letter he had not wanted to write. "It is done," he said quietly. "It is done in the way you would want it done, Marina, not in the other way." She waited. "David has resigned," her uncle said. "He has resigned every position he held with me. He has signed back to me, in writing, every share, every interest, every property his name was on, in connection with this family. He has signed a confession to me only, kept here in this house that covers every dollar. He has agreed to leave the city tonight on the 8 o'clock train, and to keep going, and to send word once a year from wherever he is that he is alive and well and quiet. The money he took will come back to the books over the next 90 days through a sale of his own properties that I have arranged. By the end of the quarter, your ledger will balance. No one will be hurt over this. No one will die over this. He is going home to a village he came from. He has a sister there, who is still alive." He looked at her steadily. "I could have done it the other way," he said. "I want you to know that I considered it. For about half an hour this morning I considered it. And then I remembered who told me, and how she told me. And I thought of your mother. And I did it the way I am doing it." Morena's eyes filled. She did not let the tears fall. She nodded once. "There is one more thing," her uncle said. "I am closing the warehouse on Vesper Lane and folding it into the Gallenstone concern under a different name. I am closing the cash room. From the end of this quarter, all of it goes through the bank, by wire, with no hand carry. The clean side will be the only side that touches your books. I am not asking you to keep books on anything that has $1 in it I cannot show to a taxman." He paused. "I want you to be able to walk away from this house in 20 years and have nothing in your past that could be used against you. I want you to be able to marry, and to have children, and to put your children to bed in a room where nobody is afraid of the telephone." She could not speak for a moment. When she could, she said, "Uncle." "What?" "Thank you for not making me carry it." "You carried it last night," he said. "You carried it for me when no one else would have. The least I can do is carry the next part." He stood, and he crossed to her, and he kissed her forehead the way he had kissed her mother's forehead at the funeral 14 years before. Then he left her at the window. She sat there a long time after he was gone. The river outside was the color of an old coin in the late light. Somewhere out on the water a slow horn sounded. She thought of David on the 8 o'clock train, going home, of the man she had called Uncle Davide when she was small, and who had brought her a paper bird from a trip to the coast on her 13th birthday. She thought of her mother in the white blouse, laughing at something out of the frame. She thought of her uncle's hand on the crown of her head, and of how light it had been, and how heavy. She thought, too, of the small choice that had not been small, of the moment at 1:40 in the morning when she had set the pencil down and known she would have to walk through the dark and tell him she had been afraid. She would not pretend, even to herself, that she had not been afraid of what he might say, of who he might become in front of her when he heard. of whether the man who had brought her home in his coat at 11 was still the man who lived inside the man who ran the family. She had walked anyway, because the alternative, staying silent, letting the gap widen, watching the books rot under her own hand, was the slower kind of betrayal, the kind that pretended to be kindness, and ate the house from inside. She thought also of old Tommaso's voice in the hall earlier, saying, "Yes, sir." She understood now what the instruction had been: to put a man on the 8 o'clock train with a ticket and a quiet hand, and to send word back when the train had left the city limits. No more than that. No less. She thought of the green-shaded lamp on the back office desk, and the column that no longer needed to be balanced in the dark. She thought of the years ahead, of clean books and a slower telephone, of the children her uncle had spoken of as though he could already see them at his table. She did not yet have those children. She did not yet have a husband. She was 25 years old and an orphan twice over, raised by a man whose name made other men go quiet at restaurants. But for the first time in a long time, she felt the future ahead of her as a thing she might walk into upright, with her own hands clean, and her uncle still living, and his name still meaning what she wanted it to mean when she finally said it to a child of her own. In the kitchen below, Tommaso had put a kettle on. She heard him moving about, setting the table for two, the way he said it when her uncle wanted company at supper but would not say so. She rose, and she washed her face, and she went down to him. The stairs were quiet. The house was quiet. The river was quiet. That was the day the bookkeeping niece chose her uncle's long life over an easy lie, and the day a feared man chose, because of her, to be the gentler of the two men he had inside him. In the years afterward, when Morena had taken over the books in full and the household had quieted to something her mother would have recognized, she kept Davidi's last receipt, the small folded slip he had signed, at the 8 o'clock departure window in the back of her ledger. She did not show it to anyone. It was not a trophy. It was a reminder, on the mornings when the numbers got loud, that there had been a night when she had walked through the dark and told the truth, and that the truth had not cost anyone what she had feared it would cost. It was the only choice either of them ever made together. It was enough.